The story begins at a university when someone shouts Tezu's name. 23-year-old Han Tae-soo then turns around upon hearing his name called in the hallway. Two girls approach and say they heard from others that he's a pro at attending classes for people. That's when the young man shows his price list for attendance services and school assignments. The young women are surprised and ask if he really charges for that, and the young man confirms. With a straight face, he says that each class attendance costs 10,000 won because nothing in life is free. He then pulls out his phone to close the deal with his new, seemingly excited clients. They say goodbye calling him professor, and Tae-soo simply replies by calling them clients. His friends see the scene and comment on how good the guy is at business, even asking for some help. But one of them asks if there's a friend discount, and Han just shows them the price list. Afterward, he heads to class, thinking that the rent nearby costs 500,000 won. Inside the classroom, the student starts answering the roll call for all his clients of the day. The professor then ends the lesson, and the young man reflects that just existing costs 1 million won a month. Right after class ends, some students notice that Han Tae-soo has already left and speculate why. The girl and her friends start laughing at the idea of him going to meet a girlfriend. They joke that he'd never date anyone and would get into a huge argument with someone over money. But for students without parental help, every second is precious for working hard. That's why we see Tae-soo at various jobs like tutoring to earn some cash. At another moment, the young man is riding his bike in the cold night, making a delivery. For him, all this effort is a necessary investment for his own survival. He checks the price of gold in the game and notices it went up by 200 won, which makes him really happy. Sitting in front of the computer, the young man calculates that he can play until 7 in the morning. Inside the game, his character takes down monsters, and he thinks how nice it would be if life were like that. Other players are impressed by his damage and comment on his fame on the server. Suddenly, an annoyed voice yells at his character while the young man is focused. Then a player with a bizarre skin appears and starts yelling at the guy for no apparent reason. The stranger says that hunting area belongs to his guild and tells the young man to leave. But Tae-soo completely ignores the warnings and continues farming, which makes the other person furious. Reading the hateful messages in the chat, he just thinks that there are a lot of weirdos on the internet. The scene then cuts to a police station where there has apparently been some trouble. Someone complains, saying they didn't start the argument and that the others provoked them first. Han is there too and wonders why he's the only one getting told off by the police. Just then, a police officer points to the girl and says she's the owner of the account, Fallen Power Angel. The girl in question is named Chae-maya, and she stares at the student with a serious expression. They both look at each other, confused, and the young man repeats her name as she repeats his. It seems to dawn on both of them at the same time, and they recognize each other with great surprise. The girl gets super excited and points at him with a shout of surprise and excitement. The police officer asks if they know each other, while the young woman calls him the real Han Tae-soo. With a smile on her face, she confirms that they know each other very well, in fact. Then she hugs him and reveals to the officer that he is her ex-boyfriend from 5 years ago. Tae-soo's mind takes him back to high school, where he remembers what Chae-maya was like. Back then, she was a quiet girl who kept to herself and had almost no presence in the classroom. With her glasses and shy demeanor, the young woman wasn't the type of person who drew much attention. She spent most of her time reading books until one day she handed him a note. We then see the young man saying goodbye to her in the empty classroom after school. With a smile, he says he'll see her later and leaves her holding the small piece of paper. The girl has a surprised expression on her face but seems happy with the invitation. To the young man, she was just an ordinary person you could find anywhere. But as the years went by, the memories he had of her gradually faded. However, there was one thing the student still remembered with perfect clarity. The day they broke up was when her family moved out of town overnight. He becomes thoughtful, as they had even planned to meet on that fateful day. The young man always wondered why she left without saying anything, and thinks about asking now. But the girl seems annoyed and complains that he filed a complaint against her without even talking to her first. Faced with her reaction, the young man begins to wonder if she really is the same person. After all, only a few years had passed, but the change in her appearance was drastic. He even thinks she's changed so much that she now looks like a troublemaker. Despite the shock, the student concludes that it's not entirely impossible for someone to change so much. The young man remembers a class reunion where many people were unrecognizable. But still, her transformation from a nerdy girl to her current look was the most radical. As he walks, he thinks that her vibe is also completely different and unrecognizable. With an irritated look, the girl turns and faces him, looking like a completely new person. Chae-maya then asks why the young man is following her, and he's a bit confused by the question. She accuses him of regretting getting 100,000 won over a few insults. The young man thinks that he expected her to laugh about the situation since they were old friends. The young woman calls him petty, and he wonders if she was always this talkative. Tae-soo explains that he isn't following her, that this is just the way to his house. The girl says she might apologize for the insults, but never for his terrible manners in the game. In a serious tone, she warns him that he was lucky to have run into her and not someone else. He then threatens to go back to the police station and reminds her that he gave her a generous discount. His ex-girlfriend gives him a dirty look upon hearing the student's sharp response. Suddenly, she changes tactics and tries to make a cute face, asking him to forgive the debt. But the young man doesn't fall for her act and states that he'll get his 10,000 won one way or another. Seeing that it didn't work, she comments on how good he is with money and that he'll be rich. The student calls her by her name, and the young woman asks what he wants now in an impatient tone. A bit awkwardly, the young man asks how she's been all this time she was gone. The question catches her by surprise, and she stares at him with wide eyes, not knowing what to say. With a smile, she comments that he was surprised because she's changed a lot in recent years. Mia says that he used to never care about what other people were doing. Then she ends the conversation by saying that in any case, nothing worth mentioning happened. The young woman says they won't see each other again, and that all that matters is that she pays the debt on time. With a smile, the girl suggests they shouldn't be curious about each other anymore. The student looks serious as she tells him not to care about each other from now on. With a cold look, his ex-girlfriend suggests they leave as if the other doesn't exist. Then Mia says goodbye with a wave and walks away, leaving the young man behind alone. The young man reflects that those were the last words from his old flame after 5 years. He gets annoyed, thinking he should be the angry one, since she was the one who vanished. The young man didn't ask for the money out of need, but for another special reason. Since he's not good with words, this was the best way he found to talk to her. In reality, the student just wanted a reason to keep her around a little longer. Watching her walk away, he accepts that this was the definitive end for them. A month passes and an announcement is made over the sound system at Seodan University. A girl with glasses and a sweatshirt looks tired as she listens to the college announcement. The announcer calls for Representative Shamia, and Tisu is stunned to hear that name. To the surprise of both, they meet again in the university hallway. The young man is shocked and can hardly believe he's seen the girl there again. The young woman, now with her old look, is super embarrassed by the reunion. The scene then shifts to a moving truck in front of a residential building. From his apartment window, Tisu notices someone is moving in. He finds it curious, as it's already been 4 days since the start of the semester. The young man thinks that his apartment is the only one nearby with such cheap and affordable rent. Looking at his phone, he remembers that most of the residents are students and thinks of Mia. A memory of their reunion at the university comes to his mind, and he can hardly believe it. At that moment, they stared at each other in the hallway as the announcement called her to the room. With a look of shock, the student asked what on earth she was doing in that place. The girl reacted badly and accused him of being a creepy stalker, which left the young man confused. He then stops her from calling the police and tells her to stop talking nonsense. The young man shows his student ID, proving that he also studies there in the same major as her. Then it clicks and he realizes this makes her his junior at the college. But the young woman doesn't seem to care and asks disdainfully what difference that makes. She reminds him of what she said before about them, pretending they don't know each other at all. With a smile, the girl tells him, as her upperclassman, to mind his own business and leave her alone. His ex-girlfriend faces him with a confident and determined expression in her decision. The young woman states that it will be better for both of them if they go their separate ways. Taesu is left confused and wonders why that would be better for them in the end. He remembers her harsh words from the night before and doesn't understand the reason for so much anger. Back in the present, the young man tries to convince himself to forget it and that it's just an attachment. But upon seeing the moving truck, he starts to consider the possibility of it being her. He thinks it's impossible, but suddenly the doorbell of his apartment starts to ring. Upon opening the door, the student comes face to face with Mia, who has become his new neighbor. With a cute face, the girl introduces herself as the new neighbor and says she hopes they get along. But in reality, the scene is much more tense, and she just offers him a rice cake. In a swift move, his ex-girlfriend simply shoves the rice cake in his face. Then she freaks out and accuses him of being a stalker, but he thinks she's the one who showed up there. The young man confirms that the apartment is his and asks if she plans on moving out soon. The young woman gets a sour look on her face as she realizes the situation she's gotten into. Mia gets annoyed for having signed the contract just because it was cheap, without checking the neighbors. She then reinforces the idea that they should act as if the other doesn't even exist there. The student just watches her from the door, without saying a word about the proposed agreement. Sarcastically, he calls her mom and in return gets a door slammed in his face. On the other side, Mia despairs as she realizes she overheard something she shouldn't have. The young man tries to talk, but she threatens him with a fire extinguisher to make him back away. Now it's official, his ex-girlfriend from 5 years ago is his new next-door neighbor. A memory from the past shows the girl reading in the library during sunset. Back then, the student used to sleep on the desk while she was nearby. That time of day in the library was also the young couple's favorite moment. Back in the present, he looks at the rice cake and wonders why she's changed so much. As he eats a piece, he tries to understand what made her look at him like she wanted to take him out. The young man wonders if he did something wrong back then but can't remember. He then concludes that she was the one who broke the promise and didn't show up for their date. A short time later, the doorbell rings again, and the young man wonders who it is this time. He goes to the door to answer but decides to check the intercom before opening. On the small screen, the student sees the image of Chamiya with a very strange appearance. Opening the door, he questions her about their agreement to pretend they don't know each other. All wet and shivering, she calls him the guy from room 3, a one with a weak voice. It turns out her apartment is completely flooded, and the young man is startled. He then quickly finds the water main and shuts the valve to stop the leak. The young man says she should call the landlord, but the young woman says he isn't answering. Seeing the whole mess, Tisu regrets not having rented a better place. His ex-girlfriend is super frustrated that this happened on her very first day of moving in. Just then, the student remembers a moment from the past when he saw her shivering from the cold in the snow. Back then, he helped her warm up in a situation very similar to the one now. Back in the present, she notices the young man staring at her and gets suspicious. The girl accuses him of looking at her, but he denies it, saying he wasn't doing anything of the sort. With her clothes all wet, her appearance ends up catching the young man's attention. He gets all embarrassed and swears he wasn't thinking about anything weird. With a serious look, the student just says he was worried about her health. The unexpected answer catches the girl by surprise and leaves her speechless for a moment. He then pulls her inside, saying she'll catch a cold as she stays wet. But she resists and attacks him with the squeegee, yelling that he can't be thinking that. With an annoyed face, the young woman thanks him for the help, but says she doesn't want to owe him anything. She then tells the young man to mind his own business, but he still worries if she'll be okay. But with the main valve closed, the heater also turns off, and the girl starts to freeze from the cold. Even while shivering, his ex-girlfriend tries to look strong and says everything's fine, but he calls her stubborn. Seeing her stubbornness, the student makes a proposal of 1,001 for every hour she spends there. The girl is completely shocked by the idea and asks what on earth he's talking about. He explains that it's the price to warm up, and if she pays, she won't owe him any favors. The young man looks away, a little embarrassed, as he repeats the price of 1,001 to the young woman. She thinks about the proposal, and the young man says the price is actually quite reasonable for the situation. With her face slightly red, the girl seems to accept the offer, and he continues to talk about it. But she interrupts him and says she'll add one more condition for their deal to work. The student looks at her with a tired expression, wondering what's coming next. With his arms crossed, he waits outside, questioning if this was a good idea. It turns out the girl is taking a shower, and he just wanted her to dry off until the landlord arrived. His ex-girlfriend enjoys the hot shower and even offered an extra 3,001 for it. The young man finds it strange how she suddenly let her guard down after so much suspicion. In the flooded hallway, he feels a weird sensation in his chest, but it's not a good one. With cold sweat dripping down, he realizes he forgot something very important that was going to happen. Suddenly, his friends show up all excited, and he remembers he had made plans with them. His buddies ask why he's outside, and the young man complains that they arrived too early. His friends arrive being dramatic, saying they rushed over when they heard about the flood. But they notice the water is coming from the apartment next door, and Tisu is at a loss for words. The young man panics because if they go inside, they'll find Chamiya and they're getting ready. He can already imagine the endless teasing from his friends, asking about the girl and if she's pretty. So, to avoid the hassle, the student suggests they go out for drinks somewhere else. The young man makes up an excuse that his apartment is a mess and offers to pay the bill for the night. His friends freak out at the offer because they know their friend is the biggest cheapskate there is. They even joke about taking him to the hospital, but the young man just wants them to leave quickly. Seeing the golden opportunity, his friends accept the proposal on the spot without a second thought. His plan was to send them ahead so he could get the girl out of there without anyone seeing. But right at the crucial moment, his ex-girlfriend comes out of the shower and appears in front of everyone. She looks confused seeing the strangers and asks who they are with an innocent face. His friends' jaws drop when they see a girl coming out of the shower, and the young man despairs. The guys then lose it and start shaking the student, asking who the young woman is. Pushed against the wall, the young man needs to think of a very quick answer to the situation. He then hugs the girl and says she's his younger sister, to her surprise. Chamiya is completely shocked by the blatant lie and shouts in disbelief. His friends don't buy the story either and say it's impossible for her to be his relative. In desperation, the young man whispers for her to play along and avoid more trouble with them. Understanding the situation, the young woman changes her expression and confirms she's his little sister. But the situation gets even more tense when another hand grabs the wall tightly. A new girl with orange hair appears with a scary smile and asks if that's really the case. She then enters the hallway and questions the young man about the story she's hearing. The young woman says she's known him for over 10 years, and this is the first time she's heard about a sister. Then, 21-year-old Nahyun asks what the real relationship is between the two of them. The scene then cuts to the next morning on the university campus with a calmer atmosphere. The young man's childhood friend still seems annoyed by the story and asks if he's serious. With a sleepy face, the student just confirms that he made it all up the night before. Haeyun can't believe he said the girl was his sister, just to throw his friends off. She then asks if nothing happened between them, and the young man denies it once more. In a flashback, we see a repair notice on his ex-girlfriend's apartment door. Apparently, the landlord showed up shortly after to fix the flooding problem. With that, the young woman was able to go back to her room, and things calmed down in the hallway. Back in the present, his friend says she believes him because he's not the type to lie to her. The girl completely trusts his word, but says she wouldn't believe the other guys. After all, she's known him for over 10 years and knows very well what he's really like. Haeyoon is the youngest daughter of a family that owns a large taekwondo academy. That's why even though she's small, she always had a talent for fighting and became a local legend. Her nickname in town was the Mad Chihuahua, which says a lot about her personality. As they walk, the young woman says she has something more important to talk about with her friend. His childhood friend asks if the girl was really Mia, and the young man plays dumb. She freaks out, saying that his ex-girlfriend has changed so much and doesn't seem like the same person. The orange-haired girl says that despite her appearance, she feels like she's looking at someone else. Haeyoon gets serious and wonders why she disappeared without a word after everything that happened. Suddenly, a voice interrupts the conversation, and the orange-haired girl gets a huge scare. Senior student Song Hee-soo, who is 24, appears and says good morning to the group. The council president thanks them for their help, as they are short on members at the moment. With a concerned look, the senior asks if the young man isn't busy with his jobs. He replies that he quit a few jobs to be able to help, leaving his friends shocked. The student says he managed to get some extra income and is ready for whatever comes his way. His childhood friend pouts, thinking about how differently he acts around the other girl. The group starts carrying boxes, and the girl wonders what else he's hiding from her. The council president gives orders to organize everything in the best way possible. The young man reveals that the person he currently likes is his senior, Song Hee-soo. But his friends show up and start teasing him for doing volunteer work. One of his buddies looks at him with a mischievous smile and says they already know everything. His friend then reveals he knows it's all because of a girl, making him embarrassed. The group comments on how amazing and next level this year's freshman girls are. But for them, the girl who stood out the most was the one with the student last night. Then it clicks, and his friends remember the weird scene between him and Haeyoon the day before. The student then turns his back to his friends to try to cut off the awkward topic. Losing patience, he tells everyone to get back to work, and his childhood friend eagerly agrees. After organizing all the boxes, the day's work finally comes to an end for the group. The council president thanks everyone for their hard work and help with everything. She reminds them about the meeting time for the next day, and the group says their goodbyes and leaves. But the senior calls the young man and his childhood friend over for a quick chat before they go. With a smile, she thanks him for coming to help even though they aren't on the council. The president then invites them to go for drinks together after the camp, and the young man accepts. He gets so excited that he says he'll go even if he gets into an accident, and the senior laughs at his exaggeration. The scene then cuts to the sunset over the city, marking the end of another day. Arriving home, the student thinks about how Maya's return has shaken him up a bit. But he tries to focus on the present and remembers that his crush now is the senior Hee-soo. In the hallway, he runs into his ex-girlfriend, and the two stand in awkward silence. The young man notices that her bag is full of snacks and is a little surprised by it. With a look of amazement, he just lets out a wow upon seeing the amount of food. He then comments that if she eats all of that, she'll end up gaining weight, and the young woman gets annoyed. His ex-girlfriend freaks out, saying it's none of his business what she eats and tells him to shut up. She then explains herself, saying she bought everything to share with everyone the next day. But the student bursts her bubble and informs her that the snacks have already been bought by the club. It dawns on her, and she realizes that he's also going to the college training camp. With a bored expression, the student listens to his ex-girlfriend ask him not to go to the camp. She says that as a senior, he's already been many times, and this is her first time as a freshman. The young man loses his patience and glares at her angrily, getting closer for a serious talk. He then asks what exactly is bothering her so much and what he did that was so wrong. With a dark look, the girl replies that he's actually the one who did something wrong. The young man tries to argue, but she interrupts him, asking him to at least state the reason for his anger. She then slaps his hand away, pushing him back with a sudden and unexpected gesture. With her face covered by shadows, his ex-girlfriend says he's right and that it's her fault. The girl then repeats her request for him not to act like he knows her and walks away. The student tries to call her back, but she enters her apartment and slams the door shut. Alone in the hallway, the young man is left completely confused and wonders why everything ends up like this. The scene then cuts to the day of the training camp in front of the university. The council president shows up with some bad news for the people waiting. It turns out a lot of people decided to go at the last minute, and now there's no more room on the bus. The senior then asks the young man and his ex-girlfriend to go with her in a separate car from the group. The group starts getting on the bus while the three of them wait there to go by car. The two of them stare at each other in silence, and the tense atmosphere between them is clearly visible to outsiders. The bus departs for the campsite, leaving just the three of them behind at the university. Inside the vehicle, the students are having fun and chatting excitedly as the trip begins. But the young man's childhood friend seems worried and looks back with a serious expression. A classmate asks what's wrong, and the young man's childhood friend tries to play it cool. The other girl then teases her, asking if she's like that because she can't see her, Hubi. Haeyoon gets all flustered and denies the accusation, but her classmate finds her reaction cute. The young woman then says the young man was going to ride in senior Hisu's car, making her worried. To make matters worse, her classmate reveals that another freshman girl was also going in the car. Upon hearing the name Mia, the student's childhood friend is completely shocked and speechless. The scene then cuts to the senior's car parked in front of the university. The council president asks if the two of them are ready to go and if they've forgotten anything. The ex-girlfriend confirms that everything is fine, but the young man appears wearing a helmet. The freshman is confused and asks what he's doing with that on his head inside a car. The student explains that it's for safety and hands another helmet to the girl to wear as well. His logic is that if it were a bumper car, they wouldn't need to wear helmets. Before she can process the information, the car takes off at high speed with the three of them. The senior drives like a race car driver, and the ex-girlfriend screams in desperation at the situation. After a while, the car stops at a gas station for a short break from the crazy ride. The freshman is completely worn out, looking like her soul has left her body from the dangerous driving. Passed out on a park bench, she wonders if she passed away and went to heaven or something. But it's actually the young man who appears with a drink and says she looked like an angel of light. The student explains that the senior's driving is famous and that her car doesn't have a single scratch. He then hands her the drink, and the girl asks why he's giving it to her. The young woman refuses the drink and says she doesn't like coffee, which makes the young man thoughtful. Taesu is quite surprised by her answer and doesn't quite understand what's going on. He then asks if she really doesn't like coffee because he had a different memory. A memory from the past shows the two of them together, and she seemed to like the drink back then. The young man says he remembers them drinking it in the park, but she suggests he's mistaken her for someone else. With a sad look, the girl says maybe she used to like it before but doesn't remember clearly now. She then claims that she doesn't recall these old stories and wants to forget the past. Chamiya calls him by his full name, and he looks at her, waiting for what she'll say next. In a serious tone, the ex-girlfriend starts by saying she's very sorry for what she's about to say. The young woman explains that she doesn't want to be stuck in useless memories of a past that's over. She then asks if they can just treat each other like complete strangers from now on. The young man thinks about how she knows how much he suffered, and that these memories drive him crazy. Even so, the student decides to take a step forward to try to resolve the situation. He thinks that since they've met again, he can't just pretend he doesn't know her anymore. But the girl bows and begs him to please treat her like a stranger. She asks to be treated like a normal freshman, apologizes for her harsh words from before. The young man understands that this was the most polite and decisive rejection he has ever received. With that, the image of the old Mia he knew shatters into 1,000 pieces forever. He then wonders why she recognized him at the police station if she wanted to be a stranger. If she had just pretended not to know him from the beginning, everything would have been different. The senior finds him distracted on the park bench and asks what he's doing there. Awkwardly, the young man says he's just watching the clouds, and she finds the answer strange. The council president asks if that's fun, and he admits it's not all that great. The student thinks that what his ex-girlfriend said makes sense, as 5 years is a long time. The senior then gets a call and tells the person that they are arriving soon. Taesu reflects that the time they spent together and apart isn't so different. The senior notices he's deep in thought and asks if there's anything wrong with the young man. With a flushed face, he tries to hide his embarrassment and focuses on what's happening. The young man realizes that in his heart now he has only one clear objective. He compliments the choice of location for the camp, and the senior is super happy about it. The president says they wanted it to be memorable since it's the last one before graduation. With a determined smile, the young man thinks that his only goal is to confess to the senior. The scene then shows the can of coffee that his ex-girlfriend refused, thrown in the park's trash. Even with her return, he affirms that his heart will not waver in its decision. The senior then asks about the freshman, and the young man says she went for a walk. Suddenly, his ex-girlfriend appears fully geared up with a helmet and protective clothing. The council president finds the freshman amusing, and the young man just watches her, confused. The senior then asks if her driving is really that scary to require all that gear. With the helmet on his head, the student vehemently denies it, and the senior finds his reaction funny. The scene then cuts to their arrival at the lodge at 11:15 in the morning on the same day. At the lodge, a student comments that the freshman was the victim of the senior's driving this year. Another girl says that probably only senior Taesu can emerge unscathed from that ride. Suddenly, a hand touches the young man's shoulder while he's carrying some boxes. A freshman calls out to him, and he turns to see what the girl wants from him at that moment. The newcomer, 20-year-old Shin Dabin, asks if he has a minute to talk with her. The student's childhood friend sees the scene from afar and gets an intense gleam in her eyes. After the orientation, senior Hisu announces the end of the day's activities. With a drink in her hand, she says it's now time for a casual get-together with plenty of drinks. The president explains that the groups have already been divided for everyone to have fun together. She then raises her beer can and proposes a toast to the excited crowd. The young man is in a group with his childhood friend and the freshman who called him over earlier. But to everyone's surprise, his ex-girlfriend also ends up in the same group as them. The student's group is the only one with one guy and 5 girls, which makes him tense. The other guys stare at him with envious looks, and he feels a bit uncomfortable. The freshman then approaches and clinks her beer can against his for a special toast. With an excited smile, the newcomer proposes a toast just between the two of them at that moment. She encourages him to chug the can, but his childhood friend glares at him with a furious look. Suddenly, Hyun shouts an enthusiastic cheers, and forcefully clinks her cans against theirs. The student watches the scene from the corner of his eye as everything unfolds around him. His ex-girlfriend just drinks her beer in silence without interacting with anyone in the group. Suddenly, the young man notices that his ex-girlfriend is staring at him with a serious expression. He turns to her, confused, but the girl quickly looks away without saying anything. The freshman then asks if they need to toast every time before they drink together. The student feels a bit awkward and takes a sip of his beer to hide his nervousness. He observes the other girls in the group and feels that the night will be quite tiring for him. With so many different personalities together, he has a bad feeling about the camp. It turns out this year's camp had many more people than usual for one reason. The reason was a trio of freshman influencers who attracted everyone's attention. The first of them was Hai Eunji, a study vlogger who did live streams online. She started streaming in the 9th grade and now has 40,000 subscribers on her channel. The second was Do Yeonwoo, who had a very popular horror-themed radio channel. And last but not least, the newcomer Shin Daebin, who was the most famous of the trio. With over 320,000 subscribers, she was a well-known gaming influencer. The girl pretends to be humble but is clearly the most popular among the 3 famous freshmen. The young man then remembers a message from the senior explaining that she put him with them to avoid trouble. Seeing the envious glares from the other guys, he understands why so many people showed up at the camp. Suddenly, the famous freshman freaks out upon hearing the name of a game and gets super excited. She says she's also been playing since childhood and asks which server the young man currently plays on. The student is a bit surprised by the coincidence but replies that he plays on the same one as her. Then one of the girls remembers that his ex-girlfriend also plays on that same server. With a mischievous smile, his ex-girlfriend plays dumb and pretends not to know anything. The famous freshman then talks about a notorious gold farmer who has the same name as the young man. Without much thought, the student admits in front of everyone that he is that player. The revelation shocks the newcomer, who freezes upon discovering the senior's true identity. The scene then cuts to the lodge's bathroom, where the girl is trying to process the information. Washing her hands at the sink, the freshman remembers something and seems to have a plan in mind. With a burst of anger and excitement, the newcomer confirms that the player she was looking for was him. The other girl from the trio says she suspected it from the beginning because of the coincidences. With a look of hatred, the famous streamer grits her teeth and reveals the reason for her search. It turns out the young man's ex-girlfriend was her master in the game and abandoned everything because of him. With tears in her eyes, the master says goodbye to her followers and leaves the guild forever. The freshman blames the student for preventing her and her master from defeating the final boss. She then reveals her wicked plan to seduce the young man to get revenge for what he did. With a confident smile, the newcomer says she has never failed to seduce someone she wanted. The girl imagines a romantic scene where the two fall madly in love with each other. And then, at the peak of their romance, when he confesses, she will crush him without mercy. Her friend thinks the plan is a bit silly, but the freshman is determined to get revenge for her master. The scene then cuts to the two of them outside the lodge in the middle of the cold night. The newcomer complains about the cold and having to use the outside bathroom because of the line. She says she didn't want to use the one outside because it's freezing, but she has no other choice. The girl complains that this happens when there are too many people in one place. Suddenly, she comes across a group of big, strong guys staring at her in the dark. One of them finds her cute, and the girl panics as she recognizes the upperclassmen. She then runs back to the lodge, screaming for the seniors for help. The newcomer's friend realizes something is wrong and gets worried about the situation. The horror radio girl screams her friend's name and runs to see what happened. But the famous freshman seems to be in serious trouble, and her expression is one of pain. It turns out she's surrounded by members of the university's wrestling team. The group asks for autographs, and the situation turns into an impromptu fan event at the camp. The news spreads, and other students rush to get an autograph from the famous girl. The senior asks the young man and his childhood friend for help to control the crowd of fans. Suddenly, a hand pulls on the student's shirt as he prepares to help. His ex-girlfriend holds him back and asks him not to leave because there's a problem in the dorm. She looks at him with a serious expression and says there's something wrong in the girl's room. The girl leads him to the location, and the student wonders what could be so important. Arriving there, he hesitates to enter, but the young woman says they need to see for themselves. Carefully, he enters the room and tries to listen to what's happening on the other side. The ex-girlfriend points to an outlet on the wall, and the young man is confused by the gesture. He then gets closer and sees something strange plugged into the outlet behind some suitcases. With the help of her phone, the girl shows that the object is actually a hidden camera. The young man is completely shocked by the discovery and can hardly believe what he's seeing. His ex-girlfriend silences him before he can scream and reveal their presence in the room. Outside, the student asks how she knew about the camera's existence. He comments that the object is very discreet and that most people wouldn't notice it. The young woman explains that she's seen something similar before but quickly tries to change the subject. She says that what's important isn't how she found out, but other more urgent matters. The girl starts to question who, when, and where the camera was installed in the room. The young man remembers that what was always most important to her was the how of things. A memory from the past shows the young woman with a radiant smile and a sparkle in her eyes. Back then, she approached him in the library to ask a question about something. But suddenly, the girl just rested her head on the table, looking very tired. The student asks if that's why she's always reading in the school library. The young woman explains that she loves following the flow of thought in books and asking, why? Young man remembers that this was her catchphrase in the past and how she used it. He thinks about how the girl insisted on using the phrase even when it didn't make sense. Back in the present, his ex-girlfriend asks why he's staring at her like that. The student says that her polite way of speaking sounds strange coming from her now. The girl gets embarrassed and admits that it must be weird to call him that now. She apologizes and says that he's the only one she can talk to about this. Understanding the situation, the young man holds her hand and prepares to act and resolve it. The girl says she can speak casually if he wants and seems more relaxed. Then, the ex-girlfriend asks for the senior's help to solve the mystery of the camera. She remembers how good he was at solving mysteries back in school and trusts him. The young woman admits it's strange to ask for a favor like this, but she had no one else to help. The young man questions if she's still going to pretend they are strangers, and she insists on her request. He asks if the camera was installed by the dorm owners, but she dismisses the idea. The girl says she checked other rooms, and hers was the only one with the hidden device. She also rules out the possibility of it being one of the guys because of the surveillance. The ex-girlfriend explains that she felt sick all day and didn't leave the room at all. She's certain that the camera wasn't there when she first arrived at the dorm earlier. The first time she noticed something strange was shortly before the orientation began. This means that the person who installed the camera was in the room during that time. The suspicion then falls on the 3 girls who were sharing the room with her. The horror radio girl Du Yanwu is one of the possible suspects in the crime. The famous streamer Shin Daebin also joins the list of people who could have done it. And the study vlogger Haeunji completes the trio of suspicious roommates. The ex-girlfriend also considers the possibility of it being someone close to one of them. The young man concludes that if all this is true, the culprit is someone from within the group. In other words, someone from the department is acting with bad intentions at the camp. He asks her not to tell anyone for now, and the girl agrees with the plan. The young man explains that rumors can hurt innocent people if they spread. The ex-girlfriend suggests telling senior Hee-soo because she seems trustworthy. With flushed cheeks, the student gets embarrassed at the mention of the council president. The young woman notices his reaction and asks if the senior is the person he likes. The young man gets all flustered and tries to deny it, but the girl insists he's lying. Suddenly, their childhood friend appears out of nowhere and startles them both with her presence. With her eyes spinning, she glares at them and asks what the 2 of them were doing alone. The student asks if she's drunk, and the young woman starts asking strange questions. She says she got rid of the wrestling guys who were bothering her earlier. The childhood friend pouts and seems very annoyed about something that's bothering her. The ex-girlfriend tries to talk to her, but the other girl seems very uncomfortable. Then the orange-haired young woman explodes and starts questioning the other about her intentions. She reminds her of saying that everything was a coincidence and that she didn't want anything to do with the young man anymore. The childhood friend accuses the other of secretly calling the student in the middle of the night. Crying, she calls her a liar and confronts her about her true feelings. The young woman says she had told her she didn't like him anymore and that everything was over. Then the orange-haired girl simply passes out drunk in front of the 2 of them. The young man carries his friend back to the room, and the first night of the camp ends like that. They decide to keep the camera a secret until they are sure who the culprit is. The next morning, the lodge wakes up to a new day and new surprises ahead. The student observes a commotion and wonders if the girls are fighting over something. Suddenly, he hears a scream and his gaze turns toward the commotion. A girl points at his ex-girlfriend and shouts that she saw her doing something suspicious. The study vlogger accuses her roommate of trying to spy on their room. The girl claims that the young man's ex-girlfriend installed a camera to watch everyone. The senior tries to calm things down and ask everyone to settle down and talk. The crowd starts whispering about the camera, and the childhood friend gets worried. The orange-haired girl clings to the young man and asks what's going on there. She can't believe that his ex-girlfriend would do something as terrible as that. With a slight smile, the student tries to reassure his childhood friend and calm her down. He hugs her and tells her not to worry, because there's no way her roommate could have done that. The ex-girlfriend watches the scene and thinks that she didn't expect the other to attack her head on. With a serious look, she stares at the study vlogger and realizes that she is the culprit. The girl Haeunji is a famous YouTuber and also shares the room with the young man's ex. At the welcome party, she acted super friendly, which made her uncomfortable. The student offers to intervene, but the ex-girlfriend says she can handle it. The young woman thinks about how quick he is to notice things and is impressed by it. In a flashback from the previous night, she asks if he really wants to stop looking for the culprit. The young man explains that it would be difficult to question all the girls to find out the truth. With a clever smile, he reveals his plan to make the culprit reveal themselves. The girl is confused by the plan, but the young man seems very confident in the idea. He explains that the culprit will have to come back to get the camera, and she gets worried. The student then asks when people let their guard down, and she thinks it's a riddle. He answers that it's right in the morning when they wake up, and she still doesn't get it. The young man explains that sleeping well means the person was relaxed and without worries. That would be the perfect moment to grab the device and force the culprit to act. With the plan in motion, the ex-girlfriend waits for the right moment to put everything into practice. The only people who know about the plan are him, the senior, and the ex-girlfriend herself. But suddenly, the accuser appears and says she saw the girl hiding the camera in the morning. The vlogger challenges her roommate to deny it and says that other people also saw the scene. The other two freshmen confirm the story and say they saw what happened. One of them says she saw the young man's ex-girlfriend going through her things in the morning. The culprit is now accusing the victim in front of everyone in an unexpected way. The young man is unsure whether to intervene, as it could complicate the situation even more. But his ex-girlfriend seems to have an ace up her sleeve and smiles confidently. She then pulls a toothbrush from her pocket and says that's what she was hiding. With an ironic smile, the girl asks what the other means by a camera. The vlogger gets flustered and tries to stammer a reply to her roommate's question. The accuser gets all tangled up and tries to invent an excuse for what she just said. She then says she heard her roommate talking about videos of famous people on her phone. With a confident smile, the young man's ex-girlfriend asks if the other wants to see her phone. The vlogger is shocked by the proposal and doesn't know how to react in front of the crowd. The girl says that since she was accused of recording something, she can prove her innocence right there. She offers her phone for the other to check anything she wants and prove she's wrong. With impressive calmness, the ex-girlfriend says that afterward she just needs to apologize. She then gathers her things and asks if she needs to show everything for them to believe her. The vlogger's eye twitches nervously, not knowing what to do next. The young man's ex-girlfriend starts emptying her bag in front of everyone there. The accuser panics upon seeing her roommate's determination to prove her innocence. The young woman shows everything she brought and says she doesn't need to show the snacks she shared. The senior tries to intervene, but the ex-girlfriend says it's fine and continues to defend herself. The vlogger is paralyzed with fear upon seeing that her plan is falling apart. With that, the student realizes that the case is closed and the truth has come to light. He thinks that the culprit could only be one of his ex-girlfriend's roommates. The strategy of making the culprit reveal themselves worked perfectly as he planned. The young man also put a bit of hand cream on the camera to identify the culprit. But since no one tried to take the device, he deduced that they didn't know about the discovery. With this advantage, the student knew that the culprit couldn't predict the next move. His original plan was to wait for the panicked culprit to contact them first. But the vlogger's bold move changed everything, and now she will have to face the consequences. The young man thinks about how his ex-girlfriend manages to stay calm even while being accused. The vlogger freaks out and says they still haven't checked all the possible places in the lodge. In desperation, she asks them to search her roommate's body for the camera. With a crazed look, the girl insists on the search, leaving everyone shocked. The scene then cuts to a moment later with the ex-girlfriend changing her clothes. The young man approaches and puts his jacket over her shoulders with a serious look. The young woman is surprised by the gesture and looks at him, not understanding the senior's action. He asks if it was really necessary to go that far to prove her innocence. With a grateful look, the girl just thanks him for his support and help. After a complete search of the lodge, the camera was not found anywhere. The vlogger then gives up and apologizes, crying for having caused all the trouble. The senior tries to calm the situation and asks everyone to put the story behind them. The young man's ex-girlfriend decides to forgive her roommate and close the matter for good right there. The student thinks about how the girl went too far, but still managed to get away with it. The ex-girlfriend then approaches the council president and calls her over to talk. She asks if she can take the vlogger for a private conversation, which scares the other girl. With a smile, she invites her for a drink to sort things out amicably. The senior then asks the young man for help with something else while they talk. The ex-girlfriend takes her roommate to a more private place so they can talk alone. She then questions her about the real reason for installing the camera in the room. The vlogger stares at the camera with a fearful look and doesn't know how to react to the question. The student explains that his ex-girlfriend didn't want to escalate the situation, which is why she acted. The culprit then questions why he has the camera, and the childhood friend appears. With a quick gesture, the young man reveals that his friend had the device the whole time. The orange-haired girl surprises the vlogger and holds her tightly so she can't run away. It turns out the camera was never found during the search because his childhood friend took it. The young man's ex-girlfriend just pretended to look for the camera, but actually hid it. The student then used the senior's name to call the other girls and empty the room. With the room empty, his childhood friend took the camera and stored it without anyone seeing. The young man explains that everything was planned to confuse the culprit and make her give herself up. The vlogger found herself in a no-win situation and didn't have time to think of an excuse. The student says she tried to appear calm, but her nervousness gave her away in the end. He reveals that the only one who looked at the outlet upon leaving was the vlogger, and that exposed her. With the truth revealed, the young man shows the camera's memory card with the evidence. On the card, they find a video of the vlogger herself turning on the camera in the room. Besides that video, there were others, but they all had one thing in common. The camera was always pointed at the suitcases and not at the people in the room. The vlogger then confesses everything and says she had no ill intentions with the recording. She explains that because she's famous, her things were often stolen, which is why she used the camera. The girl couldn't erase the data in time and didn't expect anyone to notice the device. The vlogger panicked, afraid that her roommate would use the camera against her. She knew the camera had a button to erase the data and tried to get it back. In desperation, the girl decided to strike first to try to fix the situation. The young man's ex-girlfriend understands the situation and forgives her roommate for the misunderstanding. The student thinks she already suspected it, which is why she came to him instead of the police. The young woman then says she will trust the vlogger and accepts her apology in the end. The young man and his childhood friend are surprised by the ex-girlfriend's generous attitude. The vlogger cries with emotion and asks if she's serious about the forgiveness. She feels guilty for everything she did and can't believe her roommate's kindness. The young man's ex-girlfriend looks at her with a serious gaze and an unreadable expression. With a chilling calm, she says she doesn't care about what happened there. She doesn't want to ruin the department's atmosphere, so she'll let the story go. But with a threatening look, the girl says that if the other is lying about anything, then she will bitterly regret ever crossing her path at the camp. The childhood friend wonders if that is really the same person she used to know. The young man also reflects on how his ex-girlfriend has become a different person. In a flashback from the previous night, the young woman thanks the student for his help with her friend. She admits she was worried and that he could have ignored her after everything. The young man watches her as she walks away and thinks about what happened between them. With a smile, the ex-girlfriend admits that maybe she misunderstood him a little. The young man watches the girls walk away and reflects on what happened at the camp. With the confusion resolved, the camp ends peacefully and without any more problems. They respected the ex-girlfriend's wish and kept the secret among themselves in the end. The vlogger calmed down and handed over the device, promising to cooperate with whatever was needed. The other roommates sympathized with the situation and apologized as well. The famous streamer cried and apologized to the young man's ex-girlfriend for the misunderstanding. With a smile, the young woman thanks the senior for all his help during the commotion. She admits she didn't expect his plan to work so well and is impressed. The girl asks what he means by that and seems a little confused by the question. The young man worries if she wasn't embarrassed about taking off her clothes in front of everyone. The ex-girlfriend explains that she got annoyed with the other's insistence and had to act. She defends herself by saying it was just a sports top and it wasn't a big deal. The student gets a bit flustered and doesn't know how to react to the young woman's response. With a flushed face, she says she's not the type of girl who takes her clothes off just anywhere. The girl gets annoyed that he didn't understand right away and runs off embarrassed. The young man thinks that if the vlogger had been lying, he would have called the police on the spot. But he thinks the girl panicked and acted without thinking about the consequences. The ex-girlfriend decides to let it go and says it's none of her business what happens. With a smile, she states that her only goal is to graduate in peace and without any problems. The student thinks about how the girl left an unforgettable mark on him in some way. On a social network, a photo of the vlogger sleeping with her face drawn on is posted. The scene then cuts to the second night of the camp with the group having fun. The vlogger apologizes for the bad atmosphere and promises to liven up the party for everyone. Despite the incidents, the 3-day, 2-night camp ends peacefully. The senior is relieved that everything ended well, and the young man agrees with her. His ex-girlfriend became the center of attention and spent the whole day with the senior girls. The student watches from a distance and thinks she'll be marked by this for at least 3 months. He then remembers that he went to the camp to spend time with the president. The young man laments having missed the opportunity and not having tried anything with the senior. One of his friends notices that the drinks have run out, and the senior is surprised by the news. With a smile, the president asks the student to go get more drinks for the group. He thinks it's a lot to go alone but can't refuse the senior's request. Meanwhile, the others are having fun and making bets with the remaining drinks. The vlogger calls the young man and says it's the perfect time for him to go to the girls' dorm. The student's childhood friend is sleeping, and the others are having fun drawing on her face. The girls invite him to take a group photo, but he decides to go alone anyway. The young man never imagined that the night would end so peacefully after everything. He then wonders what his ex-girlfriend is doing and goes to look for her around the lodge. The student reflects on how much her appearance has changed in the last 5 years. He remembers how she seemed to know a lot about the camera, and is intrigued by it. He wonders how she managed to stay so calm even while being accused by everyone. The young man starts to think that maybe she got involved in something dangerous. Suddenly, he notices something and his gaze shifts as he spots a figure in the distance. A girl is standing alone looking at the starry sky in silence. He approaches and calls her name, recognizing his ex-girlfriend from afar. The young woman turns around, surprised, and asks how he knew she was there. Startled by his presence, the girl starts to run to try to get away. But in her haste, she ends up tripping and falling to the ground with a cry of pain. The student approaches to help and asks if she's okay after the fall. The ex-girlfriend is surprised to see him, and he questions her about her over-the-top reaction. She apologizes and asks him to pretend he didn't see her there, and the young man is confused. The girl notices he's holding the drinks and asks if he was on a mission. She explains that she thought the senior girls had sent him to capture her and bring her back. The young man comments on how intense the others in the department are with her. But the young woman says that despite everything, they are good people, and she feels good. The student observes her and is happy that she's getting along with the group. He confesses that he never imagined a moment like that would happen again. The ex-girlfriend then comments on how the place looks like one they used to know. He remembers the hill behind the school that they used to visit together. The young man smiles and asks if she remembers that time, and she just looks at him. A memory from the past shows a pile of books, including The Lord of the Rings. Back then, they would borrow books and read together until sunset. The young man teases her, remembering how she cried over the death of a book character. With a smile, he says that her tears stained his pants that day. He cherishes this memory as one of the few happy moments from school. The ex-girlfriend looks at him and says he's changed a lot since those distant times. She comments that she doesn't remember him being so laid back, and he agrees with her. The young man says that both he and she are no longer the same kids they used to be. He reflects on how time has passed and they have matured in different ways. The student suggests that now that they'll be seeing each other at school, they should resolve their issues. The young woman listens in silence as he proposes that they apologize for what they did. With a sad smile, she explains that she wanted to keep her distance for both their sakes. The ex-girlfriend apologizes for her harsh words, surprising him with her attitude. The young man then remembers what she said on the day of the college entrance ceremony. That day the girl treated him coldly and told him to mind his own business. She said it would be better for both of them if they went their separate ways. The student becomes thoughtful as he remembers that moment and her expression. The young woman says it wasn't his fault and that she just wanted them to be strangers. She wonders why fate brought them together again after so much time apart. The girl reflects on their reunion at the police station and at school and feels confused. She says that if they hadn't met again, she wouldn't have acted so coldly. With a sad smile, the young woman apologizes to the young man for the way she treated him. But she reiterates that she doesn't want to talk about the past because it was very difficult for her. The student says that if she insists, he can tell her, but it will be hard for both of them. The ex-girlfriend looks at him, and he realizes he can no longer avoid the topic with her. With a somber look, she says that after graduation, he won't see her around anymore. The girl tries to lighten the mood and calls him to go back because it's getting cold there. The young man understands that if he insists on the topic, he might end up reopening old wounds. He knows that if he pushes too hard, he might end up losing her forever with no way back. The student fears that she will disappear again, just like what happened in their past. Suddenly, the senior appears and calls them to come back to the party with the group. The president says that everyone is eagerly waiting for the drinks and hurries them to return. The group rushes to grab the drinks, and the senior yells at them not to push. Other girls find the young man's ex-girlfriend and take her back to the party. He thinks that there's no need to rush as her goal is to graduate no matter what. With that, his first camp as a senior ends, full of new mysteries. The scene then cuts to the road with tire marks from a car on the asphalt. A black car appears at high speed with its headlights on in the darkness. On the way back from the camp, something unexpected happens on the road with them. The senior's car pulls over to the side, and she and the young man get out of the vehicle. The young man gets closer to the senior, and they almost kiss in a moment of distraction. The scene then cuts back to the tire marks on the road after the incident. The student is shocked by what almost happened, and his heart pounds in his chest. He thinks it took him 3 days to finally get some alone time with the senior. His ex-girlfriend notices the mood and calls to get the attention of the two lovebirds. The childhood friend also gets annoyed with the delay and tells them to just leave already. She says it was just gravel and that the car's windshield is intact and undamaged. The young man apologizes to the senior for tripping and says the car is fine and has no problems. His ex-girlfriend regrets not taking the bus and grumbles quietly in the car. The childhood friend hears the grumbling and looks at her with a suspicious expression. She then accuses her of avoiding the bus on purpose to be with the young man. The ex-girlfriend plays dumb and doesn't respond to the other girl's accusation. The childhood friend insists and asks if she still has feelings for the student. She accuses her of missing the bus on purpose even after saying she didn't want him anymore. The orange-haired girl gets annoyed with the hypocrisy and confronts her about her feelings. The ex-girlfriend finds the other's reaction cute and hugs her affectionately to calm her down. The childhood friend freaks out with the hug and doesn't understand the other girl's reaction. With a smile, the ex-girlfriend tells her not to worry because it's nothing like that. She reinforces that it was all a coincidence and that she didn't plan anything to meet the young man. In a flashback, the girl explains to her friend that she no longer has feelings for him. She says her friend doesn't need to worry because she's no longer interested in him. The orange-haired girl still seems suspicious and doesn't fully believe her classmate. With a mischievous smile, the young man's ex-girlfriend offers to help her friend. She proposes to help her get together with the student, and the other girl is shocked by the idea. The childhood friend can't believe the proposal and asks if she's serious. The ex-girlfriend then questions if the young man knows that his childhood friend likes him. The girl gets all embarrassed and says that everyone knows except for the student himself. She explains that he only sees her as a younger sister since they were kids. The childhood friend laments, saying that he feels guilty and pities her. The young man's ex-girlfriend can't hold back her laughter, and the other asks her not to laugh. She then advises her friend not to give up and to try hundreds of times if necessary. The young woman says that first, they need to solve the problem with the young man's senior. She points to the car and the romantic scene that almost happened between the two. The orange-haired girl looks at the car and seems to agree with her classmate's plan. The ex-girlfriend states that this should be the first problem to be solved between them. A week passes since the start of the semester, and classes begin at the university. The student hears someone call for his ex-girlfriend and turns to see who it is. The study vlogger runs towards her and calls her with an excited and happy voice. The young man's ex-girlfriend has become a central figure among the college freshmen. She turns around and tells the student to stop following her all over campus. The vlogger says the young man's ex-girlfriend is the only one for her, and he finds the attitude bold. The girl fell for her roommate's cool and charismatic attitude during the commotion. The student's ex-girlfriend says she's not interested and has stopped dressing up like before. She explains that the senior girls offered to help her get ready every morning. The young man wonders why she didn't dress up before, and thinks she didn't dress well. Suddenly, his childhood friend jumps on his back with an excited shout. The orange-haired girl hugs him tightly and calls him Kappa with a happy voice. She asks if classes are over and celebrates that he doesn't have to work at night. The childhood friend invites him to see the flowers that have bloomed in front of the school. He notices that she's being more proactive and is surprised by the invitation for a date. The young man has a brilliant idea and his face lights up with a plan in mind. He then puts up a sign that says, "Instant photos for sale," and starts a new business. His childhood friend is confused to see the young man posing next to the sales sign. She asks what that is, and the student looks at her with a smile on his face. The young man ignores the question about the flowers and starts explaining his plan to her. He tells her that he won an instant camera and 30 rolls of film at an event. Since the camera depreciates a lot, he decided to use it to earn some extra money. The student thanks his friend for the idea, making her happy to be praised by him. The orange-haired girl thinks that, in a way, this is also a type of date. She reflects on how she already knew the type of person he was when she fell for him. The childhood friend shouts excitedly and calls for customers to take pictures with them. She makes him promise that they will go see the flowers after work is done. With a determined smile, the girl thinks that she won't give up on winning him over. Suddenly, a familiar voice interrupts the moment and asks for the price of a photo. The young man and his friend turn around and come face to face with the trio of famous freshmen. The streamer asks if she can choose who she takes the photo with, and the student agrees. In a flashback, the childhood friend remembers the moment she realized she loved him. It was when she saw him together with his ex-girlfriend for the first time back in school. Back in the present, the young man gets ready to take photos of the excited girls. He positions the camera and counts to 2 to capture their perfect moment. The freshmen pose for the photos with the cherry blossoms in the background. The trio is fun and strikes several different poses for the students' photos. The childhood friend also joins them and takes a picture with the whole group. The streamer is amazed by the photos and praises the senior's talent for photography. She asks if he learned somewhere, but the young man says it was beginner's luck. The freshman gets flustered by the compliment and wonders what he meant by that. With a silly, love-struck face, the girl asks if he's flirting with her. The student then comments on how uncomfortable she seemed taking pictures before. He suggests they take a picture together somewhere else if she feels better. The freshman is surprised by the invitation and stares at him with wide eyes, speechless. The young man's ex-girlfriend approaches the streamer and calls her for a private conversation. She reminds the freshman of her promise to buy her tea and cake as an apology. The newcomer tries to get out of it, saying she's busy, but the other girl insists on the invitation. With an intimidating look, the ex-girlfriend says she wants a sweet treat now, leaving her with no way out. The streamer gives in to the pressure and agrees to go with the senior to the coffee shop. On the other side, the childhood friend watches the scene from afar and is confused by everything. The young man's ex-girlfriend notices her gaze and winks with a knowing smile. She encourages her not to be afraid and to be confident to get what she wants. The childhood friend is moved by the support and feels stronger and more determined. With her heart pounding, the girl musters up the courage and decides to confess to the young man. She remembers that confidence is the key for a woman to achieve her goal. The childhood friend calls him, and he turns to listen to what she has to say. She then proposes that they use all the remaining film to take pictures of just the two of them. But Senior Hisu appears right at that moment and ruins the romantic mood for the two. The council president waves at them and approaches with a smile on her face. She says she heard they were taking pictures and brought the whole department. The young man accepts the challenge and says he will take pictures of everyone, even if it takes a while. The childhood friend gets frustrated and grumbles that the senior showing up was cheating. In the end, they take a picture together, and the day ends with everyone having fun. The scene then cuts to a park at night with the cherry trees lit up with lights. The young man is confused by the situation and doesn't understand what's happening there. The next day, coming back from work, he takes a picture of the cherry blossoms with his phone. Suddenly, he spots his ex-girlfriend taking pictures of the flowers and is surprised. The student finds her in a place famous for being a couple's meeting spot. He notices that the girl is more dressed up than usual and becomes suspicious. With a smile and a stylish pose, the young woman takes a selfie with the flowers in the background. The young man watches from afar and sees the girl making strange poses for the photos. He concludes that she's not on a date and wonders what she's doing. What surprised him the most was that his ex-girlfriend had become a model student. His childhood friend tells him that her popularity at college is huge and real. Other classmates also comment on the girl's charm and strong personality. The young man gets annoyed seeing other guys looking at her and doesn't understand why. But the biggest change was that after that night, she stopped avoiding him like before. Now when they meet at college, they exchange greetings normally. The ex-girlfriend says that since they'll be seeing each other often, it's better not to be awkward. Looking back, the young man realizes he was very conscious of her the whole time. But now he understands that there's no more need for all that drama between them. With a smile, the young woman seems to agree with the young man's thought and looks at him. The student concludes that he doesn't always have to be the one to take the first step to get closer. He decides that the best thing to do is to ignore her and go home to continue playing games. The young man notices something strange, and his gaze shifts to the side with curiosity. He sees his ex-girlfriend talking to two suspicious-looking guys in the park. The student wonders if those guys are friends of the girl and keeps watching. Upon hearing the conversation, he realizes they don't know each other and the guys are bothering her. With a smile, the young woman ignores the warnings, and the guys invite her for a drink with them. The young man gets worried about the situation and thinks about intervening to help his ex-girlfriend. He's unsure if he should get involved, but the girl seems to be in trouble there. The student thinks that if he gets involved, he might end up making the situation even worse. Suddenly, the young woman sees him and calls him over as if they were a real couple. The young man is completely shocked and speechless at being pulled into the middle of the mess. His ex-girlfriend introduces him as her boyfriend and asks the guys not to bother them. She hugs him tightly and uses him as an excuse to get rid of the annoying guys. Taesu is completely shocked and has no idea what Mia is up to now. She winks at Taesu and asks him to just play along, telling him she'll owe him one. The guys look at the scene, confused, and ask if they're really dating. Looking annoyed, Taesu calls out Mia's name, losing his patience. Mia answers him with a cute smile and a super cheerful and happy voice. But to Taesu's surprise, the men were actually his seniors from work. His seniors get excited about the news and all Taesu can do is hide his face. Suddenly, his childhood friend, Haeyuan, appears with an ice cream and wonders why everything always turns into a mess. She watches this scene from a distance and can't understand why Taesu and Mia are together again. One of the seniors then pulls out his phone and asks the supposed couple to get closer for a picture. He tells them not to be shy and to cozy up since they're in the early stages of their relationship. Mia gets desperate and tries to shout that Taesu is just an upperclassman from college. But the senior ignores her and forces them together to take a picture of the new couple. At that moment, Taesu firmly and quickly grabs Mia's arm. Mia is surprised by Taesu's unexpected move and stares at him, her face blushing. With a serious look, Taesu tells Mia there's no point in trying to explain anymore. He explains that their seniors are super excited and will twist anything into them dating. Taesu says he knows it sucks, but it'll be faster if they just get the pictures over with. Mia seems to agree with the plan and stays quiet with a thoughtful expression. She then agrees to take the pictures since she owes him one, and Taesu gets annoyed by the comment. Mia gives a faint smile and seems happy about the whole situation. But Taesu says he was just kidding, and Mia is left a bit confused. Then she says there's no special reason, and they're just doing this to get away. Taesu, blushing, replies that he already got what she meant. With his phone in hand, one of the seniors gets ready to take the couple's picture. That day, he took a picture with Mia for the first time in 5 long years. The scene then shifts to springtime at the university, with a much lighter atmosphere. This is the season when love blossoms around every corner. In the hallways, students are already talking about the upcoming club recruitment drive. With that, Taesu heads to the student council room for his media department. When he gets there, he opens the door to find the rest of the crew gather. But the room is dark and filled with gloomy-looking guys who greet the newcomer. Taesu asks why they're all cooped up in there on such a beautiful day. One of them even asks his buddy to set him up with some girls, but then immediately gives up on the idea. Turns out, the communications department was full of people looking to mingle. The attendance of guys at the parties was as high as 99%, and the reason was obvious. But whenever the crowd gets bigger, some guys always show up and spoil the vibe. That's why some people avoid the department's activities because of the upperclassmen. As a result, the parties would end with just the guys wondering what went wrong. So, the upperclassman, Hisu, decides there will be no more drinking parties for a while. Hisu asks everyone to get a grip and for the seniors to watch their behavior. Because of this, the guys in the department are bummed out about their dating plans being ruined. His friends complain that Taesu is a dead end when it comes to dating, but he thinks that's an exaggeration. Taesu thinks to himself that he is interested in dating and holds someone special in his heart. An image of Mia comes to mind and he remembers her with a smile. Suddenly, Taesu starts blushing and wonders why he thought of her out of the blue. His friends notice and ask if he's blushing because he's thinking of something naughty. A memory of what happened earlier comes to mind, and he remembers her hug. Taesu remembers Mia said she'd repay him for the favor and wonders how she's going to do that. One of his friends then calls out to him, and Taesu turns to see what he wants now. His friend asks if Taesu's really not dating Haeyoon, and he denies it once again. His friend explains that he's not asking because he doesn't know, but because Haeyoon, apparently a guy from another department, confessed his feelings to Haeyoon. In her room, Haeyoon looks at the picture with a goofy, lovesick smile on her face. Her roommate, Yoon, teases her, asking if the picture with her is really all that. Yoon continues teasing and asks if Haeyoon was trying to lean in for a kiss earlier. Her 21-year-old roommate, Park Yoon, mentions that she heard about the confession. She asks how many poor souls that makes so far, wondering if it's reached 10 or 12 guys yet. Yoon says she could give the guy a chance, but Haeyoon replies that she barely even knows him. Yoon says Haeyoon deserves someone better, but she shouts that there's no one else like Taesu. With a confident smile, Haeyoon says there's no one better, and Yoon thinks she's exaggerating. Yoon asks if Haeyoon wants to hear the story of how she fell in love all over again, but she refuses. Yoon then asks if Haeyoon is okay with that other girl, leaving her confused. The roommate shows her Dabin's channel and says the streamer was hitting on Taesu, but Haeyoon replies that it's totally fine, and her friend is surprised by how calm she is. She explains that Taesu barely even looked at Dabin, which means he isn't interested. Haeyoon says her crush has always been like that, smiling as she remembers the way he is. According to her, when he likes something, he can't take his eyes off it. With a goofy smile, she concludes that Taesu is like a fool when he's focused on something. Haeyoon then gets serious and says the person she's really worried about is someone else. Just then, an image of Mia appears, showing that the ex-girlfriend is the real concern. Scene cuts to Mia talking with Hisu about what Taesu said. The two discover they go to the same diner, and Hisu gets super excited. They then high-five and celebrate the coincidence while Taesu watches from a distance. The girls greet him, and Taesu asks why they were talking about him. On campus, his senior is talking to her professor on the phone. She says she's almost done preparing all the materials. Meanwhile, his ex-girlfriend is on her phone, and he watches her from a distance. And Taesu then thinks about how this whole situation is bothering him. He wonders what they were talking about to bring up his name in the conversation. Suddenly, she asks why he's staring at her, which startles him. With a smile, she asks if he's afraid she was talking bad about him. She notices his red face and he realizes it was all just a test. She reassures him, saying she wouldn't do that since he helped her at the camp. She says she got along well with the senior, and the protagonist thinks she has changed. Before, his old flame was very shy and even had trouble making conversation. That's why when he saw her having fun with the other girls that day, he felt like she was a complete stranger to him. His childhood friend also mentioned this, and now he understands why. Then, his ex says she's gonna leave so she won't be in the way, leaving him confused. With a smile, she reminds him that she promised to repay the debt she owed him. Next, she makes up an excuse for the senior, and the young man can't believe it. She then turns to him and wishes him good luck with a smile on her face. The protagonist turns all red and realizes she's trying to set him up with the other girl. Alone with the senior, he wonders if it's okay for his ex to do something like this. In the college hallways, his old flame walks away with a serious look. As she walks, she thinks to herself that a debt is a debt. Back in the room, the senior smiles while working on her laptop. Taesu turns completely red and can't believe he's alone with the senior. The moment he had wished for during the camp has finally happened. But he's freaking out inside because he wasn't mentally prepared for this. Suddenly, she says she's finished her work, and the protagonist gets startled. He panics and wonders what he should do or say before she leaves. Then she turns to him and asks if he has eaten yet. Awkwardly, he says no, and she asks if he's had dinner yet. The senior is overjoyed with his answer and celebrates internally. Later, the two of them go out, and she says she needs some sugar after working. He comments that he didn't know the place, and she says it's her secret spot. With a smile, she says that thinking of it that way makes everything more special. He feels energized just by being next to her in that moment. The protagonist reflects that the reason he likes her is because of these things. When he left home to live alone, the senior was the one who helped him the most. She helped him find a place to live and even got him a job. But he thinks that above all, what helped him the most was her smile. He wanted to confess sooner, but he was too busy looking after his friend. And this year, his old flame returned to complicate things even more. The senior asks if something is wrong, and he plays it off, saying he got something in his eye. Suddenly, she surprises him and asks what he wanted to tell her. She reveals that his ex told her the guy had something important to say. The protagonist is furious about her meddling in his affairs. He then thinks that there's only one thing he really wants to say. In his imagination, he confesses and says he really likes the senior. With his face all red, he finally manages to say how he feels about her. The young woman is super emotional about the confession and covers her mouth with her hands. But in reality, he thinks that if he had the courage, he would have done it already. He reflects that she's always kind but doesn't know if it's out of romance. He's afraid he's just mistaking the senior's kindness for something else. The young man imagines a scenario where he gets turned down and she reacts coldly. With that, he freaks out and changes the subject, asking about the meals she mentioned. He suggests they get some meat after the exams and she excitedly agrees. With an awkward smile, he thinks he needs to be more careful about things. He remembers that the senior should have graduated this year. That's why he believes fate has given him one last chance with her. The girl then calls his name, pulling him out of his thoughts. With a smile, she asks for a piece of his crepe, leaving him speechless. With that, the protagonist decides he needs to treat his ex-girlfriend to a meal. The scene then cuts to later that same night, showing the neighborhood. Hantisu returns home with a silly grin on his face after the date. He's so happy that even a child on the street finds the way he's running funny. With the date over, he heads home thinking about what to get for the girl. But on his way back, he finds his old flame collapsed on the ground. He's surprised and doesn't understand what's happening at that moment. The girl seems to be feeling very unwell and can barely stand up on her own. He approaches and recognizes her, calling her name in a very worried voice. She lifts her face and he notices that she looks terrible. He thinks that there she was again, in a completely unexpected situation. In a weak voice, she asks what he's doing there at that moment. Meanwhile, at a bar, the famous freshman's friends are having fun together. One of them is super annoyed and is complaining about someone to her other friends. The famous streamer wonders if Hantaesu is even a real man. She freaks out and doesn't understand why he can resist her charms. No matter how many times she tries to get close, he always finds a way to escape. She even tried to sit next to him, but he brazenly sold the spot. He explains that he has no time to rest because he studies without his parents' help. That's why he works 7 days a week and can barely support himself. The famous streamer freaks out at the excuse and says it's not convincing at all. With tears in her eyes, she says that no one has ever treated her that way. The vlogger friend remembers a warning about him having a flawed personality. She explains that when women talk like that, it usually means big trouble. But the famous streamer doesn't care and still thinks he should be interested in her. One of them then considers that he might be dating his childhood friend. However, the vlogger seems to disagree with this idea and says she's not so sure. The girl then prepares to tell a story about something she saw. With a sly smile, she reveals that she witnessed something very interesting. The scene returns to the protagonist who found his old flame on the street. The girl is lying in his bed and seems to be in a deep sleep. He looks at her and wonders what he should do in this situation. She mumbles something in her sleep, leaving him even more confused. The student knows the scene is compromising, but he thinks it was unavoidable. In a flashback, he finds her at the door and asks why she won't go inside. She says she can't go in and he doesn't understand why. She explains that she was drinking and watching a movie in her room. But suddenly his ex-girlfriend noticed something strange in her room. It turns out a giant cockroach appeared and left her completely terrified. To make matters worse, the nasty bug disappeared right on her bed. She then says she'll just sleep there on the street, leaving the guy shocked. He drags her to the door and tries to wake her up to get her apartment passcode. Back in the room, he wonders how much she drank and feels lucky to have found her. Looking at her face, he questions why she has changed so much over the years. He notices her clothes and realizes his ex has grown up a lot. He remembers she used to be the same height as his friend and is amazed by the change. The guy picks up one of her clothes to get a better look. With that, he wonders what she's trying to do by pushing him towards others. He looks at the sleeping young woman and doesn't understand her intentions at all. Last time it was with his childhood friend, and now it's with the senior he likes. He questions if she hates him so much that she wants to keep him this far away. But if she hated him, why did she hug him like that the other day? Then he starts to think of another possibility for all of this. He considers that, despite everything, she might still have feelings for him. But he shakes his head and dismisses the idea, thinking it's impossible. He reflects that someone with feelings wouldn't say the things she said. A memory of her saying it would have been better if they hadn't met again comes to mind. With that, he starts to feel like he might be the only one stuck in the past. Meanwhile, she has moved on and acts as if nothing ever happened. He then wonders if it's not time to finally leave it all behind. He thinks of the girl he used to like, with the sun setting in the background. A memory of a tight hug between them comes to his mind. Next, he recalls their first kiss with a sense of nostalgia. The young woman he loved so much in those distant school days. With that, he concludes that she now only exists in his memories. Back in the present, a door slams shut, ending his thoughts. The scene then cuts to the shower, with water pouring down heavily in the bathroom. The protagonist takes a cold shower to try to cool his head and forget. He then decides he's over it and will treat her just like any other freshman. He thinks he was too conscious of her while she didn't care about him. Then he remembers that there's someone much more important to him now. The senior was the only one who made him forget the idea of cost-benefit. She appeared just when he thought dating wasn't worth it. But his opponent is the famous goddess of the department, very hard to win over. He wasn't going to stoop for someone who didn't like him, but still, If she decided not to care anymore, then he wouldn't care either. Fortunately, he doesn't have a night shift and can play games until he feels sleepy. But suddenly the girl starts to toss and turn and have a nightmare. He gets scared seeing her like this and doesn't know what to do. He wonders if he should have just left her outside after all. He decides to put up with it just for today, since she should wake up in a few hours. But she starts complaining about the heat and kicks off some of the covers. This makes the protagonist turn all red, and his heart races at the sight. He questions why he reacted like that after deciding to forget her for good. He tries to calm down and tells himself he won't care about what she does. But as he looks at her, he's surprised and a little scared by the sight. He decides to take her outside and convinces himself it's not because he cares about her. Suddenly, a voice interrupts him, and he stops in the middle of the hallway, frozen. It was the senior calling him, and he's paralyzed when he sees her standing there. He can't believe his crush found him in this situation. The senior asks what he's doing, leaving him completely speechless. The scene then shows the building with the full moon illuminating the dark night. His ex-girlfriend starts to wake up and mumbles, still half asleep. She opens her eyes and finds herself sitting on the hallway floor next to him. The student is embarrassed and doesn't know how to explain what happened. With fake tears, he asks if she had a good dream, and she is startled. She freaks out and asks why he's crying and what he's doing there with a blanket. He then says he's taking the blanket back since she's finally awake. He reminds her of their agreement to keep their distance and says she was right. He then goes into his apartment and says he'll settle things with her tomorrow. He leaves her outside and tells her he won't care about her anymore. The girl's confused and doesn't understand what he meant by that. Inside, he complains that nothing ever goes right when she's around. The scene cuts to late March on the university campus. It's club recruitment season and there are posters everywhere. Walking through the courtyard, the protagonist overhears other students talking about clubs. Suddenly, he's surprised to see someone he knows approaching. His ex-girlfriend is also shocked to run into him there on campus. The two of them stare at each other, and he thinks his attempt to stay away didn't work. He remembers she promised to set him up with the senior but ruined everything. She gets annoyed by the teasing, and he says it's just a joke. In a quick flashback, he recalls the senior seeing him with his ex the previous night. He then asks what she was doing there at his place. The senior explains that her family sent food and it was too much just for her. That's why she went over there to share some with him and his roommate. With a gentle smile, the senior shows that she just wanted to be friendly. The senior left apologizing, and he tried to explain the misunderstanding. She got it all wrong, but he tried to explain the situation the next morning. Back in the present, the protagonist asks if she is having insomnia. She explains that she hasn't been sleeping well and has been drinking before bed. She says she's never passed out in her life and apologizes for the mistake. She also says she doesn't remember anything that happened in his room. With a red face, she insists that she can't remember well. But a memory of her calling his name surfaces in his confused mind. Hantaesu gets annoyed and asks if she wants him to pretend nothing happened. Awkwardly, she throws her wallet at him and tells him to charge her for every last cent. Then she threatens him, saying she'll call a lawyer if he spreads rumors. Alone, he thinks he'll add this to the bill and keep his distance from her. But on campus, his decision to stay away seems to be tested once again. Suddenly, the vlogger appears and hugs his ex-girlfriend from behind in surprise. She greets the protagonist, and he tries unsuccessfully to remember her name. He then asks about the flyers and if she got a new job. The vlogger explains that her friend is starting a new club at the college. With that, she invites him to join the new game development club. He thinks the flyer is poorly made, but she says it was on purpose. She explains that the founding members have already been chosen, and the rest is a formality. The streamer invites him, saying he would be welcome and that she owes him one. But his old flame turns around sharply and yells for him not to go no matter what. He thinks he wouldn't go anyway since it's an all-girls club. Then, the vlogger notices something in her friend's hair and pulls out a leaf. The protagonist finds it strange that the two are such good friends after what happened. He wonders it's because he started to become more conscious of her. Seeing her like this, he feels that she has grown up and become a different person. But he thinks that doesn't make sense because her face and voice are the same. Then, the student thinks that if he really wants to check, there is a way. With that, he enters a room and peeks inside to see if he can find the girl. He finds her inside looking tired and is surprised. She accuses him of stalking, and he says she's the one in the wrong place. He tries to leave, but she tells him to come in because he's distracting her. He thinks there's a very simple way to know if she's the same person as before. The protagonist then decides to check for something very specific on her. She notices his gaze and clears her throat to get his attention. She asks why he's staring at her so much, and he hides his nervousness. Hantaesu says that despite her insomnia, she looks fine, and she says it's makeup. The young woman holds her book tightly and says it's not because of him. With a serious look, she reinforces that it's not because of him, so he shouldn't worry. She explains that her sleep schedule is messed up but not because of him. He responds dryly and she gets annoyed with his reaction. The protagonist smiles and says he thought it was because she played games all night. She gets confused, and he brings up the Gukbap story, making her embarrassed. Suddenly, the famous streamer shows up and recognizes him as a famous gamer. She reveals that his ex-girlfriend is the master of the 5th guild on the server. In a game flashback, the streamer celebrates reaching the top 5. But her master says the goal is to be number 1 and that they shouldn't settle. The girl says she's satisfied because she wouldn't have gotten there without her help. Back in the present, the young woman thinks about how incredible her master must be. She then promises herself that one day she will meet her master in person. With that, the streamer reveals that the protagonist's ex is her game master. The scene cuts to the student council room of the media department. The streamer is completely shocked and speechless at the revelation. She wonders if her master is really Han Tae-soo's ex-girlfriend. She finds it strange since the two of them even ended up at the police station together. The protagonist remembers that her guild has many enemies, and she agrees. The vlogger then says that if anyone is dating the guy, it's his ex, not his friend. She reveals that she saw them taking pictures together arm in arm at the park. She also says that they snuck out of the camp together. With a suspicious look, she wonders if they had known each other for a long time. The scene cuts to classroom number 3 in the university building. The streamer enters the room with a determined look and a plan in mind. She finds the student council president and calls her over for a chat. With a scary look, the streamer asks the president a hypothetical question. She asks what she would do if her master were in a bad relationship. The president is confused, and the streamer reveals that it's about Han Tae-soo. The girl freaks out and wonders whether she should root for the supposed couple or not. Suddenly, the protagonist's childhood friend appears and interrupts the conversation. The two of them turn around and are surprised to see her standing there. His friend grips the supplement container tightly and seems annoyed. With a threatening look, she asks the girls to tell her more in detail. The scene cuts to late afternoon in the neighborhood, with the sun setting on the horizon. The guy's childhood friend rings the doorbell of his ex's apartment. She rings it several times, but it seems like no one is home at the moment. The protagonist opens the door and is surprised to find his friend there. She is also startled to see him and asks what he's doing there. She explains that the doorbell doesn't work, and he finds the situation strange. He tests the doorbell and realizes that it really is broken. With a smile, he asks who started the rumor that he was dating someone. The girl asks if it's not true, and he confirms that it's just gossip. He reminds his friend that his ex herself said their relationship was over. She says it was just to confirm and that she wanted to check if his ex knew. With a suspicious look, she takes a sip from her mug and seems thoughtful. He asks what his friend is doing there, and she explains that an appointment was cancelled. With a red face, she says she has about 3 free hours. Awkwardly, she invites him to go for a walk or do something together. But he declines and says he's in the middle of some extra work right now. The young woman is disappointed but hides it and says that work comes first. Then she asks to stay in his room until he finishes, and he agrees. Alone, the girl sighs and seems frustrated with the whole situation. The protagonist thinks that he knows about his friend's feelings for him. But in his mind, she's still the same 11-year-old girl from the past. Because they've known each other since they were little, he can only see her as a child. Suddenly, she says her brothers are coming to visit and will buy her lunch. He declines the invitation, and she complains that she hasn't even said the day yet. He jokes with a saying about not accepting free things, and she laughs. He remembers his friend's 2 overprotective older brothers. Ever since he was little, they would threaten him and always pick on him. He recalls that now the 2 of them are on the national team. That's why he knows that if he looked at his friend differently, his hair would disappear. The protagonist looks to the side and reflects on his childhood friend. He thinks that she has changed a lot from high school until now. She grew up and her physique changed, but not as much as his ex-girlfriend. He wonders if his ex avoids him because she's afraid he'll notice she's a different person. He considers the idea of her having an identical twin but dismisses the possibility. After all, both he and his friend recognized her, and she knew things from the past. Besides, on their first date, she even knew about his family history. In a flashback, she says she doesn't like coffee, and he remembers that. He also recalls mentioning the place they used to go. The protagonist remembers how well their conversation flowed that day. With that, he realizes there's no more need for so much formality. He questions if he's overthinking things or if there's another reason, or if deep down he secretly hopes she is someone else. Suddenly, his childhood friend gets his attention and he's startled by her closeness. He's surprised and speechless to see her face so close to his. She says his face is red and asks how long she was there. She explains that he seemed restless, so she went to check if he had a fever. She touches his forehead and says it doesn't seem like he has a fever. With a flushed face, she asks if he's feeling dizzy or anything like that. His heart races and he wonders why he's having this sudden reaction. He then removes her hand from his forehead with a quick, firm gesture. She is startled by the abrupt movement and doesn't understand his reaction. She wonders when she got so close to him and why she's touching him. His friend remembers some advice about creating a chance and questions why she suddenly thought of that. He then looks at his friend with a flushed face, wondering if she sees this as an opportunity. With her face all red, she gets closer to him, and he wonders if she's being too eager. A memory then surfaces of his ex offering to help set her up with Han Tae-soo. His old flame stares at her seriously while the other refuses the help she was offered. With conviction, she says she'll win him over on her own, using her own strength without help. But despite her confidence, she feels frustrated for not being able to do anything in practice. He calls her name and asks her to wait a second while he continues working on the PC. Then, she gets very close to him and asks him to wait just like that for a little longer. Suddenly, the doorbell rings, interrupting the tense moment between them in the room. Outside, someone keeps pressing the doorbell insistently without stopping. It's his ex-girlfriend calling for him while his friend is sitting right on his lap. She's confused and wonders if Han-tae-soo isn't home at the moment. His childhood friend covers his mouth, finding it strange because she heard the keyboard sound before. In desperation, she holds him tightly so he won't make a sound and reveal their presence. His ex thinks she needs to tell him she opened his package by mistake because it was misdelivered. She then gives up and decides she can explain the whole situation at school the next day. The childhood friend is relieved and says the other girl's sudden appearance was a surprise. With a worried look, she turns around and asks if he's okay after the scare. But the protagonist has passed out on the floor, and his childhood friend freaks out at the unexpected sight. In a flashback, the childhood friend shakes him and asks if he's okay. He remembers that people used to criticize him for not understanding her feelings. His friend has several legendary stories like kicking a pickpocket. Since she was little, she grew up in a world of survival and learned that strength is justice. She refuses to listen to his advice and continues to act on impulse. She breaks the chopsticks with her strength, and he asks her to control herself. People say the two are a match made in heaven, and the protagonist gets annoyed. This makes him feel like an ant before an elephant, and he doesn't know what to do. He sees himself as small and with no chance against his friend's strength and determination. With his friend crying in his arms, he knows she's a good person. But her wild instincts scare him and leave him unsure of how to act. Back in the present, he wakes up and decides to skip work that day. Time passes and mid-April arrives with exams approaching. In the game club room, the girls complain about the arrival of exam season. The streamer freaks out, and the president reminds her that 8 weeks of the semester have passed. The girl lays her head on the table and complains that problems always come all at once. The vlogger asks why she's so stressed, and her friend asks the reason. The streamer then starts talking about the protagonist's ex and their supposed relationship. The vlogger says she's not sure if their relationship is a confirmed thing. Suddenly, his ex-girlfriend appears, and the streamer freaks out at her presence. The vlogger greets his ex, and she wonders where the streamer is. Suddenly, the streamer appears lying on the couch, and his ex finds the scene strange. The streamer freaks out and whispers that the guild master has something going on with him. The council president notices her fatigue and asks if she stayed up all night. The vlogger then asks if she spent the whole night on a date with him. She then reveals that she saw the two of them together at the park on a romantic date. His ex is surprised by the revelation and doesn't know what to say. The vlogger asks what's going on between them, and she gets annoyed. The vlogger implies that the two are dating in secret, and his ex gets irritated. She then thinks about him and what she really feels for him deep down. The streamer is surprised to see the master's reaction and doesn't understand anything. The scene cuts to the men's restroom with the sound of running water in the background. The streamer washes her face and smiles slyly with a plan in mind. She thinks that if they are enemies, there can't be anything between them. From the expression on his ex's face, she's sure he doesn't stand a chance. If there's nothing between them, the streamer sees a chance for herself. The council president is confused and asks what chance that is. The streamer then realizes that having nothing with him also means something else. With her head all mixed up, she looks up at the sky and sees birds flying. Walking across campus, his ex seems thoughtful and a little sad. The vlogger says they are often seen together, which is why there are rumors. His ex denies it but remembers several moments they spent together. She reflects that ever since she met him again, everything has been exhausting and confusing. She tries to remember where it all went wrong and recalls their first date. She also thinks she should have been more cautious upon discovering they were neighbors. The girl feels careless and suddenly someone calls her name by surprise. It's the protagonist who finds her lost in thought, and she's startled by his presence. She says she was just thinking about him, which is why she was surprised to see him. He finds her clothes strange and asks if she gave up on dressing up. She gets embarrassed and wonders why she's explaining herself to him. She says it's her choice, and he agrees with a smile on his face. He compliments her and says the clothes remind him of how she used to be. She is surprised by the compliment and doesn't know how to react. He says goodbye and wishes her good luck with her studies for the upcoming exams. She waves back and wishes him good luck too with a smile. Alone, she wonders why she waved back and feels confused about everything. She reflects that since they reunited, her life has become a complete mess. She thinks that none of this was part of her plans for college. Meeting him again at the university was something completely unexpected for her. The constant fights and encounters were also not in her plans. And to make matters worse, the two of them get stuck alone in the elevator. Getting stuck with him was also not in the plans, and the girl feels nervous. He presses the emergency button and asks for help to get out of there. He informs her that someone will arrive in 20 minutes, and she remains silent. The protagonist warns that it might take longer because of rush hour. With a smile, he asks if she's worried about them being stuck together. He points to the camera and says there's nothing to worry about. The girl asks if he's not scared, and he says the rent is cheap. She freaks out and says this situation feels like a horror movie cliché. He listens to her theory and is confused by her imagination. He jokes about telling a scary story, and she forbids him from doing it. She explains that she was tormented by someone who liked those things in her childhood. With a serious expression, she says she doesn't like anything supernatural. Suddenly, the elevator lights flicker and go out, leaving everything dark. She panics and screams, thinking it's a ghost, and he calms her down. He hugs her to protect her, and she is surprised by the gesture. He explains that it was just a power outage and asks her to calm down. She snuggles into his arms and stays silent for a moment. He finds her reaction strange and asks since when she became so scared. The lights come back on, and he says that if she freaks out, she could get hurt, and that's worse. He says everything is okay now and tells her not to worry anymore. He turns all red, and she moves away from him with a flushed face. Awkwardly, he tries to explain himself, saying he was just trying to calm her down. She yells that she knows, and that she doesn't need him to state the obvious. The protagonist is flustered, and she stares at him with a red face. With a flushed face, she feels her heart racing and remains silent. He takes off his own jacket and puts it over her shoulders. She thanks him, and he tells her to hang in there even if it's a little cold. Sitting on the elevator floor, he asks if she has anything to say. She says no, but mentions she was curious about one specific thing. He explains he was trying to check the game's auto hunt feature. He says that maximizing efficiency is crucial, and the girl becomes thoughtful. Then she says there's something that made her curious and asks if she can say it. She asks why he's always talking about money all the time. He gets annoyed and asks if she's looking for a fight again. She wonders why he works so hard if his family is rich. He remembers that her parents were super strict and thinks the situation is risky. He then gets irritated and asks why she meddles in other people's lives. With a serious expression, he reveals that he cut ties with his family. He says he left home 4 years ago, and she asks if he ran away. He says it wasn't exactly running away, but rather leaving because he's not a kid anymore. He laments not being able to get a scholarship because of his family record. The girl thinks she always found something strange about him. She remembers how he made a living with part-time jobs. She also recalls that he chose a university without much prestige. She reflects that the Hantaesu she knew would never do those things. His family was very wealthy and known in the neighborhood for their fortune. They lived in a mansion with a large yard and even servants. A life completely different from her precarious reality at the time. She lived in a small rented room and had a simple life. Suddenly, she apologizes to him and he is confused. She remembers calling him spoiled and complaining a lot when they met again. She thought he was a snob who just wanted to mess with her on purpose. Because of that, she thought of him as a delicate flower in a protected greenhouse. He says he wanted to talk more but didn't know how to approach her. He's not good with words and thought money would be a way to see each other. She understands and says she didn't do the right thing either and feels guilty. She apologizes and fears that he will hate her if he finds out the whole truth. The protagonist then tells her that at one point, he thought she was someone else. She is surprised by the revelation and stares at him with wide eyes. He says she changed so much that she seems like a different person, but that's not the case. He remembers his friend commented on it and finds the idea funny. He gets closer to see if she's okay, and she is surprised by the gesture. He explains that she's staggering and asks if she's sick. She says it's just the heat, and he finds that strange because the elevator is cool. She complains that 30 minutes have already passed, and he says it's the traffic. With a smile, he offers to call again if she's worried. Suddenly, she starts to feel hot and short of breath in the elevator. He didn't notice the change and is surprised by her account. The young woman then loses consciousness and faints on the elevator floor. He gets scared seeing her passed out and calls her name, worried. With a flushed face, she seems to be in a deep, unresponsive sleep. In the past, people called her silly for her constant smile. Even when she found out she was adopted, she never lost her smile. The young woman held the adoption news with a radiant smile on her face. Her mother would hug her and say she was still her beloved daughter, even when her father's factory went bankrupt and the family fell deep into debt. Amidst all the hardships, her parents never abandoned her. In high school, she was bullied, but she still kept smiling. Despite everything, she never lost her smile and faced everything head-on. In the past, someone finds her collapsed and asks if she's okay. Whenever things got tough, her prince would appear to cheer her up. In high school, her mother was hospitalized, and yet she continued to smile. She smiled because her mother wanted to see her happy face before she passed. The following summer, the girl was home alone in the darkness. She found out her father spent all the hospital money, but she still smiled. She learned that the prince's mother was her mother's friend and went to find her. The girl went to beg for help, but the woman treated her with contempt and coldness. The guy's mother blamed her for him insisting on staying and treated her cruelly. She thanked the young woman for ruining her son's life with a sadistic smile. The money she begged for fell to the floor without any value or meaning. The amount she managed to get no longer made any sense at that moment. The young woman couldn't even give her own mother a proper send-off. When her father dragged her away from her hometown, she stopped smiling. Only then did she finally understand why she was considered stupid. She thought that if she had never existed, her prince wouldn't have fought with his family. Maybe her mother wouldn't have collapsed from overwork and would still be alive. Maybe her father's factory wouldn't have gone bankrupt, and everyone would be happier. She felt guilty and wished she had never existed so as not to cause pain. Only by thinking of never having existed could she manage to smile again. Even a silly girl like her still had one thing she could do. She thought about getting rid of everything and ending her own pain. Back in the present, she wakes up startled and panting in the guy's bed. With a sweaty body and breathless, she seems to have had a nightmare. The girl looks around and wonders where she is and what happened. She gets scared when she sees the protagonist's friend there and doesn't understand anything. Suddenly, she sees the friend holding a knife and panics. She screams in terror, and the other girl is startled by the unexpected reaction. His friend asks why she's screaming, and the young woman is confused. She recognizes her and asks if she had a nightmare or something. The protagonist's childhood friend is in the kitchen, cooking something on the stove. She explains that he brought her home after she passed out in the elevator. She says she was called and was worried about the two of them. The protagonist's ex's face turns red, and she notices something strange. She freaks out when she realizes she's not wearing her own clothes at that moment. The childhood friend says she was the one who changed her clothes, and the young woman calms down. Then she hands her a bowl of hot egg porridge. His ex looks at the food and stays silent for a moment. The friend says the taste will surprise her and guarantees it's delicious. She then asks where the protagonist is, and the friend says he went out. The friend asks if his ex is disappointed that it's her there. She says no and apologizes for always ending up like this with her. The friend asks if her presence bothers her, and the ex denies it's a misunderstanding. His ex says it's okay and that she doesn't mind the situation. With tears in her eyes, she reminds her friend that she said she could handle things on her own. The friend tells her to think of it as payment for the cherry blossom photo. With her arms crossed, she tells her to eat before the porridge gets cold. She says sick people should focus on getting better without worrying about anything else. His ex smiles and feels her heart warm with her friend's kindness. The friend threatens to eat the porridge, and his ex shouts that she'll eat it. She tries the first spoonful and seems to really like the taste. With a smile, she savors the porridge and enjoys the meal. Her eyes light up, and she's surprised by how good the porridge is. The friend smiles proudly and says she guaranteed it was delicious and amazing. His ex compliments the dish and says the aroma fills her nose. The friend agrees and says she thought the same when she first tried it. His ex asks where she learned the recipe, showing her curiosity. She asks her friend to teach her, and the young woman gets a strange expression. His ex is confused and doesn't understand the other girl's reaction. The friend then reveals who taught her how to make the porridge. With a smile, the friend reveals that it was his ex who taught her. The scene cuts to a pharmacy at night with people coming and going. The protagonist asks for a fever reducer, and the clerk asks if it's for him. He says it's for a girl he knows and seems a bit embarrassed. He explains that she hasn't been able to sleep well lately. The clerk suggests she might be taking something for insomnia as a precaution. With that, he runs off without checking anything and feels a bit guilty. He knew was a way to find out if that girl was really his ex. In a flashback, the young woman reveals she has a scar on her chest. He is surprised by the revelation and jokes about it being an emotional scar. He smiles and she stares at him with a serious and slightly embarrassed look. He asks why she mentioned it and she stays silent. She says it feels good to share a secret because it makes them seem like a couple. Then she suggests that instead of telling him, she could show him the scar. With a flushed face, he is speechless and his heart races. He freaks out and asks if she knows what it means to show him that. He gets flustered and asks if she understands what it means to show it. She comes up behind him and hugs him with a smile on her face. With a red face, she says she knows what it means, and he is surprised. The scene ends with the revelation that she's confessing her feelings for him. She says she would show him, and that it wouldn't be a problem if it were for him. He comments that sometimes she seems bolder than many guys he knows. He had the chance to check for himself, but his hands wouldn't move. Like a coward, he asked his friend to confirm the ex's scar. He left the checking to his friend and waited for the result. The protagonist wonders why he hesitated so much to do the check. He questions if it was out of fear of finding out she wasn't who he knew. The protagonist's childhood friend is in the kitchen washing dishes. She reveals that it was his ex who taught her to make the porridge. With wide eyes, the friend asks if the ex has forgotten the recipe. The friend remembers it was her mother's recipe for when she got sick. His ex is surprised and remembers the recipe fondly. She says the taste might be different because of her cold. The friend confirms the ingredients, and his ex remains silent. She compliments her friend and says the taste is even better with her cooking. The ex asks if her friend added anything else, and she gives an awkward smile. The friend reveals she doesn't know, and that it was the protagonist who made the porridge. He then arrives home and finds the two of them talking in the kitchen. He opens the door and is surprised to see his friend standing there. She greets him and says he took longer than she thought. He asks about the ex, and his friend says she just left the room. The friend says the ex thanked her for the help and promised to buy her lunch. She says goodbye and that she needs to go as it's almost curfew. Before she leaves, he calls her and asks about the scar check. His friend looks to the side and seems a bit embarrassed by the question. With a serious look, he asks if his ex-girlfriend had the scar. His friend sets up a meeting for next Sunday and says she'll tell him there. She blackmails him and says she'll only tell if he buys her lunch. She says he wanted to use her, so she needs something in return. With a smile, he says she's being generous and could be mad. With a flushed face, she says it's no problem and that he can use her. The friend promises that no matter what happens, she'll always be by his side. With a sparkle in her eyes, she declares her feelings, leaving him speechless. She jokes and asks if he fell in love and if she should confess. She laughs and says it's a joke but that he needs to confess first. With a smile, she asks if he hasn't forgotten their promise. The friend says goodbye with a wave and leaves, leaving him alone. He thinks about how his friend is such a good person and washes the dishes in the sink. He reflects that she's always cheerful and someone everyone could love. A memory of a late-night date with his friend comes to his mind. With a flushed face, he watches her and feels a little emotional. His friend smiles with tears in her eyes and seems happy with the moment. The protagonist thinks someone so bright is too good for him. He washes the dishes and reflects that his friend is too good for her own good. He remembers her blackmail and his ex's clothes thrown on the floor. Meanwhile, his ex-girlfriend is taking a relaxing bath in the shower. She reflects on her friend's blackmail and realizes something important. She understands that her friend has already given him the answer he so badly wanted. The scene cuts to the next day with a blue and sunny sky in the city. The protagonist is on his computer and suddenly hears the door open. His ex-girlfriend appears in discreet clothes and stares at him in silence. The two of them leave at the same time and coincidentally meet in the hallway. With a smile, he greets her, and she is surprised to see him. He asks if she's feeling well, and she looks at him attentively. She says she's fine thanks to him and seems a little embarrassed. She thanks him and leaves, leaving him alone in the hallway. In the nurse's office, his ex talks about her insomnia with the doctor. She explains that it's gotten worse and asks if she can get a prescription. The doctor says she can't prescribe sleeping pills and asks about her history. She asks if anything stressful has happened, and the young woman becomes thoughtful. In the classroom, his ex reflects on what she heard at the nurse's office. She thinks that her ex-boyfriend tends to focus more on words than on context. She gets annoyed and blames him for her insomnia and feeling unwell. With a hateful glare, she stares into space and seems very irritated. She thinks that if she hadn't met him again, she wouldn't be going through this. She wonders if things would be different if she had ignored him in the beginning. But she concludes that it's too late to regret her choices. The scene cuts to the university campus with a blue and sunny sky. She thinks that he hates her and that there's nothing more to be done. She thought he knew everything she did in the past. She believed he knew she took money from his mother. She wonders why he never said anything and why he didn't confront her. The girl then questions why he left home and cut ties. Walking across campus, she runs into the protagonist and is surprised. She accuses him of following her, and he denies it with a confused expression. She insists that he has been following her the whole time. He explains that he was just worried about her and nothing more. She gets embarrassed and wonders if he heard what she said earlier. He looks confused, and she freaks out when she realizes he didn't hear anything. She remembers the rumor that they're dating and gets annoyed with the situation. He tells her to forget it and let people say whatever they want about them. He explains that people who like to gossip have already decided what to believe. He says he's never cared about rumors, and she stares at him thoughtfully. With a confused look, she seems not to understand his attitude. She remembers that he used to worry about rumors and even dragged her away. He says goodbye and leaves, leaving her alone on campus. With a heavy heart, she watches him walk away in silence. She reflects that the reason for her insomnia is her ex-boyfriend. She thinks of him as her first and last love with a sad smile. The scene cuts to late afternoon in the neighborhood with the sun setting. In her room, she looks at her closet and thinks about the next 2 years. She needs to hang on until he graduates so she can move on. Lying in bed, she feels exhausted by the whole situation. An image of him appears in her mind, and she feels confused. She wonders why he suddenly appeared and messed with her head. She thought he would be living happily to prove a point. But his eyes seem full of regrets, and she doesn't understand why. With a serious look, she reflects on his feelings. She takes the medicine he gave her and promises herself to be stronger. She realizes that the memories she buried keep coming back to haunt her. The young woman swore to herself never to see him again and to live as if he didn't exist. With a cold smile, she cut him out of her life and decided to move on. She promised not to cling to the past and to start a new and different life. But even with all the promises, she still felt stuck in the past. A voice in her head calls her regretful and confronts her about her feelings. The voice asks if she isn't just hesitating because she doesn't want him to hate her. The voice questions if her heart didn't flutter when she saw him up close. She denies it and says she's not hovering around him on purpose. Several memories of the moments they spent together flash through her mind. With a flushed face, she shrinks back and denies having any feelings for him. The voice accuses her of being afraid to admit the truth and of having sold him out. She fears that if he finds out the truth, he will hate her forever. The voice asks if she really thinks it's better to keep everything in the dark. The voice questions if she isn't just trying to protect herself from getting hurt. Maybe she prefers that he never finds out the truth so he won't suffer. With tears in her eyes, she tells the voice to stop and leave her alone. But the voice calls to her and asks why she hasn't been writing in her diary. She says she's fine and just forgot because of the fever and fatigue. The girl promises she will write in the diary, and the voice seems satisfied. The voice says it knew it wouldn't work out and that it's coming over soon. She freaks out and asks why the voice is coming to her room. She answers her phone and seems very nervous about the call. The protagonist calls her name and she hangs up the phone in a hurry. She gets scared when she sees him and he asks if she's done with her call. The scene cuts to the building with him calling her name again. He knocks on the door, and she hits her head, startled by the noise. The protagonist asks what happened and if she's okay. She asks if he heard the call, and he denies having heard it. He explains that he made too much porridge and brought some to share with her. He says his friend told him she really liked it last time. She thanks him but says she's fine and that he can take it back. He insists and says she doesn't need to worry about it. She freaks out and yells that she's fine, leaving him speechless. She apologizes for yelling and says she's fine and he doesn't need to worry. He then asks if she still has feelings for him. He says he understands she's being nice because they know each other. She wonders why he continues to be so nice to her. She questions if he doesn't hate her even a little bit after everything. She remembers that she disappeared without a word and treated him coldly. He looks at her and asks what would happen if he didn't resent her. With a flushed face, she screams and can't believe what she just heard. She calls him a liar and asks if he really doesn't hate her. He says he'd be lying if he said he didn't, but he felt relieved. From the moment he saw her again at the police station, the protagonist recalls that day in her expression. He says he was relieved to see her alive and safe after so long. With tears in her eyes, she gets emotional at his confession. He says he knows she's not interested and that he had a hard time, but he reinforces that his distance isn't because of resentment. With a smile, he tells her to think of it as a friend's concern. He leaves the porridge at the door and tells her to rest well. Alone, she sits on the floor and reflects on what just happened. A voice in her head reminds her of how she would change her mind upon seeing him. With a heavy heart, she cries, and the voice calls her regretful. The scene cuts to 4 years ago in a building with snow falling. The protagonist is sitting on the stairs with a sad and tired look. With his face flushed from the cold, he seems to be waiting for something. A woman appears and asks what he's doing there all alone. She says he's been there since last night and asks if he's waiting for someone. He explains that he lost his wallet and was waiting for the employment agency to open. The woman informs him that the agency closed a while ago, and he is surprised. He feels unlucky and thinks that nothing ever goes right for him, no matter what he does. The protagonist apologizes for bothering her and turns to leave, discouraged. But the woman calls him back and makes an unexpected proposal. With a smile, she asks if he has nowhere to go that night. Then she invites him to her place, and he's left speechless. He stares at her with wide eyes and doesn't know what to say. With a gentle smile, the woman looks at him and waits for his answer. She asks if he wants to go or not, putting him in a difficult situation. Back in the present, the scene cuts to the building with a clear and sunny sky. The protagonist finds a note in the pot and is surprised by what he reads. His ex thanks him for the food and says it was great in the note. He smiles and notices that she even washed the dishes before leaving. 4 days have passed since she fainted in the building's elevator. Seeing her go to school made him relieved that it wasn't anything serious. A memory of his question about her feelings comes to mind. He questions if he still has feelings and why he worries so much. He remembers hearing her say she doesn't feel anything for him anymore. He wants to know what changed her so much but denies liking her again. With a flushed face, he thinks that he actually has feelings for someone else. With a smile, the senior looks at him and he feels his heart race. He feels like he's in love and realizes it's her he has feelings for. He thinks that if he hadn't met her that day, everything would be different. Suddenly, the streamer calls him and notices that his face is red. She asks if he also has a cold and he finds her troublesome. The streamer sees the situation as a chance to get closer to him. She imagines the scene as a dating simulation game and gets excited. With a smile, she offers to take care of him, making him embarrassed. But he disappears and she is confused by his sudden vanishing. She yells at him to stop ignoring her and chases him across campus. Suddenly, the senior holds his hand and takes him for a walk. The protagonist is surprised by the gesture and doesn't know how to react. With a smile, she says it was the perfect timing, leaving him speechless. The two of them walk hand in hand across campus and enjoy the moment.